Well, hello and welcome back. Let's talk about awakening today here. Yes, let's do that. Let's talk about awakening. Call it the Great Awakening, call it enlightenment, call it whatever you will. Whatever you want to refer to this experience as is completely up to you. The words that we use to describe anything are just words. Literally, when you think about it, a word is simply a collection of sounds that a group of us here in the world have gotten together and decided it means something. This is true of all languages in the world. And, well, it doesn't make any difference which ones you speak. It's the same idea. In fact, in A Course in Miracles, Jesus tells us that a word is actually twice removed from reality. First of all, it's not the thing it represents. Eyebrow is just a collection of sounds, meaning this thing. It's not the thing, is it? And the thing isn't real either. It appears to be a component part of this thing, which is certainly not real. It's not who we are. So it doesn't make any difference the word that you use, nor does it make any difference what your spiritual background is, what tradition or traditions you were raised in, if any, what traditions you currently follow, what speaks to you. Something's speaking to you here in A Course in Miracles. So let's approach awakening from this standpoint. We're in chapter 2 of the text. We're in the same section that we've been on for the past few days. There's so much here that we're taking our time on this. And today we're covering paragraph 4, chapter 2 of the text, part 3, and the title of the section is The Altar of God. Paragraph 4, that's it today. So much to say. We've been looking at the very handy teaching device, a visual analogy that Jesus presents us of the altar at the center of a building, a temple, a church, sanctuary, synagogue, mosque, call it whatever you want to call it. We'll use the word temple for the purposes of these videos. There is the exterior of the temple, and there is the inner altar. And we're invited to consider which is more important, the outer structure or the altar within. And it's the altar that's really the heart of things. In other words, waking up, awakening, enlightenment is wholly, purely, and completely an inside job. It's all about what's inside. Now, inside is just a word. God simply is. But here in the world where we need to hear this over and over and over again, we need A Course in Miracles. We need spirituality because we identify with the 80% water conglomerate. That's an interesting way of putting it, isn't it? When we identify as an individual human being, we're running around competing with other individual human beings for what we deem to be scarce resources and on and on and on, and fighting with each other. We don't have in our conscious awareness the ongoing experience of who we are, one with God. We're removing the barriers to that. That's spiritual practice. So how do we do that? Well, in the thought system of A Course in Miracles, it's our practice of forgiveness. We're invited here to develop spiritual sight. The vision of Christ is another way of looking at this. And this analogy of the exterior of the temple and the altar is very helpful here, because in the last paragraph, Jesus told us here, paragraph 3, that the body's eyes can't see the altar. They can't see what's within. They see only the exterior structure, the nose, the gray hair, the differences that appear to exist, tall, short, man, woman, different ethnic groups, the walls of the temple, the elaborate artwork, the frescoes that are painted on the walls or the ceiling, the vaulted ceilings, the beams on the ceiling, the color of paint that may or may not be on the walls, the exterior. That's what the body's eyes see. Spiritual sight cannot see that. On the other hand, it sees only the altar, and it can see that the altar has been defiled and needs to be both repaired and protected. So what both repairs and protects it? Accepting atonement for ourselves and the practice of forgiveness. This is how we wake up. It's worth repeating, even if you feel like you've been exposed to this idea countless times and you know it. It's worth, isn't it? If you've been a long-time student of anything, it's worth hearing again, because you could understand it on a deeper level, and perhaps we've missed something along the way. So, forgiveness, we're not forgiving in the way that the world thinks of it. One tends to think of forgiveness in the world as forgiving something that someone did to you. They caused you harm. Forgiveness, true forgiveness, as talked about, as we're instructed to practice here in A Course in Miracles, is a whole different situation. Rather than forgive someone for what they appeared to do, emphasis on appeared, we forgive them for what they did not do. There's never been any separation of any kind. There is not now. How can someone do something to you if we're one with God? One, there is no other. True forgiveness overlooks all of the outward appearances. In other words, it overlooks illusion, it overlooks error, and recognizes that the separation never occurred. Practicing forgiveness in this fashion, under the guidance of your inner teacher, is how you wake up. This is how you do it. And to have the understanding that we're overlooking error, that we're forgiving someone for what they did not do, we're recognizing our essential oneness, that this is in fact a dream. Forgive yourself for dreaming it, because it's your dream. Just as when I'm upset or offended, it's my dream. And what am I upset and offended about? Well, that is my forgiveness opportunity. This applies to all of us. We simply recognize that the separation never took place. This is the atonement. We accept the atonement for ourselves. We forgive the Son of God. Often, countless times, as many times as we remember to do it. The entire experience that we have here in the world can rightly be seen as a giant forgiveness opportunity on a platter being gifted to you for you to take advantage of and free your mind and return to where you've always been, recognizing that you've always been there. There's no real journey in the end or any path. These are simply terms that we use. We use a very helpful learning set of sounds called spiritual path, spiritual journey. We're not going anywhere. We've never gone anywhere. We can't go anywhere. There's no other place for us to go to. We're at home in God. So as we look upon the altar with spiritual sight that we develop, we recognize, okay, well, there's some ego clinging here. There is a defilement. And, well, you can use a different word, but we're repairing the altar through our forgiveness, and we're protecting it using the atonement as the defense. It protects the altar. What we're doing here is, while we appear to be here as this strange looking thing we call a human being, we need to protect the mind, because we're not yet in a place where our forgiveness is total, all-encompassing, and constant. That's why we appear to have very beautiful, blissful moments, and you may have had several of those. In fact, you may have even had the experience of our oneness with God, which the Course refers to as revelation. You may have had even that experience. And every glimpse that we get, we need to continue in that vein, don't we? Because we fall back here in the world. That's a manner of speaking. We're not going anywhere, but the ego still has a foothold unless we forgive, forgive, forgive. So that's why it's a yo-yo experience here in the world, where we appear to alternate between beautiful experiences and a disaster. So when we forgive, when we accept atonement for ourselves, we repair and protect the altar. We bring the mind into our service, and the mind begins to really help us. It's powerful. It's powerful. And delay comes to be intolerable. You may have reached a point where you want to go home, so to speak, where you're sick of all of this and you want the peace of God. You want the peace of God. Like the workbook lesson, it's there for a reason. I want the peace of God, and only that. You may have hit that point. You reach a certain point on the spiritual path where delay becomes absolutely intolerable, where you can't stomach any more BS. And we begin to see this in our own experience the more we forgive, and I invite you to do it. This course isn't going to just magically awaken you. We have to do it ourselves. There's no getting around it. And that is true of any spiritual tradition that you might be entertaining or that you practice. You've got to do the work, because nobody's going to just wipe the slate for you. Remember, you're having a dream that you're an individual. So when the dream appears to end, if you still are in the mind, not this, but in the mind dominated by the thought of being separate, then what's going to happen is you're going to have more experiences of separation. It doesn't make any difference if you adhere to the notion of rebirth or not. Separate is, well, separate. What we need to do is set the ego aside. There's never been any separation. We need to realize that on the path. Forgiveness is how we do that. Studying this course is how we do that. And we do this under the direction of our inner teacher. There's no set formula in words for this. We do as we're guided. And by the way, it is a great indication of progress if you have let your own ego go enough, if you've set it to the side enough to let your inner teacher take control. We're invited to do this in the course. This is another way that we set the ego aside, don't we? I mean, this one makes perfect sense. If we say, help me, please help me, or whatever words you want to use, we ask our inner teacher for guidance, for support, for help, because we recognize that the ego can't do it at all. We can't do it by ourselves. We're not by ourselves. This is profound. It's very, very profound. And the more we expose ourselves to this through study and practice, the more we become aware of our essential oneness. And we begin to recognize on the path, you may have had this experience, that things that used to bother you greatly no longer bug you. Things that would have sent you into a fit of rage several years ago, or even last week, don't bother you. They don't affect you in the same way. Yes, stuff is still going to happen. That's duality. Stuff's still going to happen, but you don't have to experience it the same way as suffering. It can go. But if you don't practice forgiveness, if you don't listen to the guidance of your inner teacher, then that suffering is still going to be just as acute, if not more so, until you make the decision that you want to see. Above all else, I want to see. That's another workbook lesson. The text really goes hand in hand with the workbook and puts these ideas, which can seem abstract, especially at first, into context. This is how you wake up. So I invite you to do that. And this is what time is for, by the way. Most of us, the overwhelming majority of us, have a gradual program because in simply one thought, we're not able to wipe away the entirety of the ego and let it all go at once. So deep and ingrained is our clinging to it, yet we're capable of that. And in our gradual program, we develop and maintain an awareness. So what do you forgive? Anything that disturbs your peace, anything that is not peace, anything that is not joy, anything that is not happiness, limitlessness, anything that pisses you off, that's a place to begin, anything that makes you uncomfortable. And blanket forgiveness of the world itself is also very powerful. Forgive the ego. It doesn't exist. Forgive your brother. Forgive the Son of God. Forgive space, time, the world itself. Extend, and make this a habit. And that is how you wake up. All right. I'd love to have all of you join me here on this channel. Thank you to all of you who have subscribed already. And I invite the rest of you to hit this little button right here, the red arrow. That's the subscribe button. And I would love to have you. I offer several of these videos a week, and I am absolutely here for your questions and comments. If you have them, please feel welcome to reach out. It's very important on the spiritual path that if we have a question, that we ask it. Now, you don't have to ask me, but if you don't ask me or a human teacher or a friend or a colleague in some form or another, please ask your inner teacher, because that's who's speaking to you. What you see before you right here, this thing is an image. It's a projected image on your screen that's been reproduced in these things that I don't get, called pixels and all of that stuff. It looks like a human being, but it's your inner teacher that's really speaking to you. So if you've got a question and you choose not to ask a human teacher, ask your inner teacher, and you should do that anyway as well. Do that. This course aims to get you in touch with your inner teacher, so please do. And I'm here as a guide. I'm here to help in any way that I can, and I thank you for joining me.